the English have managed to surround us in such a way that leaving to engage in battle with an opponent overwhelmingly superior to us would lead to our certain demise.
Und das wiederum ist, glaube ich, das entscheidende Moment für Langsdorff.
I think this was the deciding factor for Langsdorff.
Ich sagte, aufgrund seines Gewissens, aufgrund seiner Einstellung.
His conscience told him that it was pointless to sacrifice the lives of 1,000 young men in pursuit of a task that could not succeed.
Von 1,000 jungen Menschen zu opfern.
If he sailed, he was facing certain death, and a death that would mean dishonour, because the ship might well sink in shallow water, and a lot of his secret equipment, especially his radar, be captured.
The Battle of the River Plate was over. Harwood and his men would return home as heroes.
Everyone wants to see these men who gave the Graf Spee such a beating. A memorable day for Londoners able to watch the sailors march past.
The sinking of the Graf Spee was hugely important. It was the first major naval victory of the war and was immediately used to full effect by the Allied propaganda machine.
And I may add that in a dark, cold winter, it warmed the cockles of the British heart.
Langsdorff took his crew across the River Plate to Buenos Aires. On arrival, he was branded a coward by the press for not taking the fight back to the British, even though the odds were against him.
When he landed in Buenos Aires, he came under great pressure from the press as to why had he come to Buenos Aires. And the pressures on the man must have been absolutely unbearable. He knew that on his personal decision he had thrown away one of the German Navy's greatest assets. That instead of a victory, he'd suffered a defeat. And it was understandable, therefore, that he would decide that there was only one way out.
Als mir bei der Verabschiedung in Montevideo, wo ich ja
saying goodbye to me in Montevideo when I was transferred, he said, "Say hello to Germany for me. Say hello to my family."
Und in diesem Wort liegt eigentlich
There's a lot in that sentence.
Und das ist ein wirklich bewegendes Moment für mich gewesen.
That was a truly moving moment for me when he said this and said goodbye.
On December the 19th, Langsdorff gathered his crew together in Buenos Aires and assured them that they were now safe and would be looked after. That evening he joined fellow officers in the senior ratings mess of the Arsenal building where they had been stationed. He was said to have been at ease and in good spirits. He then retired to his room and wrote a letter home to his family. It would be his last.
Now, deep down inside me, I'm happy and content. Everything is being prepared, and I have the peace and quiet in which to write you this letter, to bid you farewell and thank you.
If this is God's will, then I shall cheerfully meet my death, despite life having been so dear to me, because it gave me all that it had to offer. Then there are some very personal lines, and then in conclusion my father writes, "Be proud in your grief, and prove yourself to be a true soldier's wife. Give my love to Jochen and Inga." And then his signature. It still moves me.
Sometime in the early hours of the morning, Captain Hans Langsdorff shot himself. The captain of the pocket battleship Graf Spee was buried with full naval honours in Buenos Aires. His officers and crew were joined by Argentine armed forces in forming a guard of honour through the streets. German and Argentine dignitaries stood next to representatives of the British merchant sailors, whose lives Langsdorff had spared. The Battle of the River Plate was the first great media event of the Second World War. The world looked on as Langsdorff made his fateful decisions. Many branded him a coward for not leaving Montevideo with all guns blazing.
I think in a way, Langsdorff was more heroic doing what he did than going out and immolating himself at the hands of the British. Because Langsdorff was very conscious that the young men in his crew should not pay the price for his error, for his disobedience, for his mistake.
Von daher sage ich, die Entscheidung von...
I maintain that Langsdorff's decision was the correct one at the time, that it was the correct one later on, and that it remains the correct one today.
1000 Menschen
1,000 men
verdanken
owe their life to Langsdorff.
But Langsdorff was only one of many victims. A total of 108 men lost their lives that day. 66 years later, survivors from both sides joined together in a cemetery in Montevideo to remember those who fell in the Battle of the River Plate.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. We will remember them.